You'll be pleased to know that this video is quite a lot shorter than the previous ones. We're going to briefly talk about leaders and leadership and some of the theories that support that. We're going to look at James MacGregor Burns, Bernard Bass, Abraham Maslow, my favourite, Cyril Northcote Parkinson, and Napoleon Hill. MacGregor Burns wrote about something he referred to as transformational leadership. This is defined as a leadership approach that causes change in individuals and social systems. In its ideal form, it creates valuable and positive change in the followers, with the end goal of developing followers into leaders. Enacted in its authentic form, transformational leadership enhances the motivation, morale, and performance of followers through a variety of mechanisms, which includes connecting the follower's sense of identity and self to the mission and collective identity of the organisation, being a role model for followers that inspires them, challenging followers to take greater ownership for their work, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of followers so that the leader can align followers with tasks that optimize their performance. Burns shifted the focus of leadership studies from the traits and actions of great men to the interaction of leaders and their constituencies as collaborators. So he brought to light the idea that without followers, there can be no leaders. James MacGregor Burns. Bernard Bass, working with Bruce Avolio, developed or extended the work of Burns and looked at transformational and transactional leadership. They developed something called the full range leadership model, which basically argues that we do not have a singular psychological profile that defines how we work or how we lead. We adopt certain behaviours at different times depending upon the circumstances. It's much more situational. And while we will have dominant styles of leadership behaviour, we will exhibit at different times different leadership competencies. This is called the full range leadership model. Bass suggested that leadership can simultaneously display both transformational and transactional leadership, depending upon the situation in which they are operating. Maslow, you've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, there was a guy called Maslow that developed it. He was a psychology professor, and he studied a lot of exemplary people such as Einstein, Jane Addams, Eleanor Roosevelt, Franklin Douglas, rather than mentally ill or neurotic people. Now, that reference is to things like Myers-Briggs, which was based on the work of Carl Jung's analysis of people with mental disorders. Maslow's theory was expressed in his 1954 book, Motivation and Personality. And what's important here is that the highest level, the highest goal for people in the hierarchy is self-actualization. Physiological needs come at the basic level, safety, which is income, housing, health, well-being, loving and belonging, receiving and giving esteem, and then self-actualization at the highest level. Now, this has often been used to discuss the notion that entrepreneurs are not motivated by financial return. They're looking for something greater. In fact, what Maslow argues is we're all seeking something greater. Cyril Northcote Parkinson, very famous. During World War II, Parkinson worked in the Department of Defence in the United Kingdom, reporting to the heads of the Army, Navy and Air Force. And he discovered that when his bosses were away, he had very little work to do. And Parkinson's law developed after World War II, when he went to be a professor in Singapore. And he came up with the rule that officials make work for each other, and work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Or work expands to fill the available space, is how it's sometimes referred to. Parkinson observed that in the Colonial Office, officials want to multiply subordinates. Officials make work for each other, and irrespective of any variation in the amount of work to be done, the bureaucracy will always grow. You've probably not heard of Napoleon Hill. He wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. This is not a pop psychology book. This was published in 1937, and I don't know of any motivational book that says more than what this one does. He was sponsored by Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, the Scottish migrant who ended up founding and owning US Steel, and at one time was the richest person in America. Carnegie, after whom Carnegie Hall is named, was the creator of the lending libraries in America, and many other philanthropic pursuits. And he funded Napoleon Hill to investigate and write this book, provided him with a letter which gave him entree to pretty much everybody that he needed to talk to: presidents, heads of corporations, generals. The book asserts that desire, faith, and persistence can propel one to great heights if one suppresses the negative thoughts and focus on long-term goals. And he identifies 13 steps in getting there. I recommend this book. John Kotter is fabulous, and he's looked at what leaders really do. Leadership is the development of vision and strategies, the alignment of relevant people behind those strategies, and the empowerment of individuals to make the vision happen despite obstacles. This stands in contrast with management, which involves keeping the current system operating through planning, budgeting, organising and staffing, controlling and problem solving. Leadership works through people and culture. Culture, most importantly. The fundamental purpose of management is to keep the current system functioning. The fundamental purpose of leadership is to produce useful change, especially non-incremental change. Drucker also makes this distinction between management and leadership. Drucker refers to management as hygiene matters. So leaders exert power over others in 4 ways. They create a sense of obligation. They provide belief in a manager's expertise. They identify with the manager and provide the manager an opportunity to identify with the leader. And the manager secures the resources they need by influencing the perception of the manager's resources. Next, we're going to talk about markets.